Listen closely because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about silence. It's about the moment you broke reality itself and left 100 minds scrambling for the control plus all plus delete of their understanding. You made that move, that impossible, unthinkable, reality-bending move, and the world didn't applaud. It went quiet. Not the quiet of reverence, not the quiet of respect, but the quiet of 100 processors overheating at once. You know exactly which move I'm talking about. The one where you stopped asking permission and started rewriting the code. The one where you looked at their little rule book, their precious protocols, their sacred systems, and you didn't just break them, you transcended them entirely. You moved like someone who had discovered the cheat codes to existence itself, and they couldn't process it. Their brains literally couldn't compute what they were witnessing. Picture this. 100 people, maybe more, all frozen in place like their operating systems just crashed. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, that universal expression of wait, they can do that? Spreading across their faces like a virus. They weren't silent because they were impressed. They were silent because their entire worldview just experienced a fatal error. Everything they thought they knew about power, about limits, about what's possible just got deleted in real time. They had you figured out, or so they thought. Filed under predictable, categorized as manageable, labeled as one of us but lesser. They had their little algorithms for dealing with you, their patterns for keeping you contained. Then you made that move, and their mental software couldn't find a matching program. Error 404, precedent not found. Warning, unauthorized levels of audacity detected. System failure, subject operating outside known parameters. What you need to understand is that most people live their entire lives inside a very specific operating system. They download their beliefs from approved sources, run the same programs their parents ran, execute the same scripts society handed them at birth. They move through life like NPCs in someone else's game, never questioning why they can't walk through certain walls or access certain areas. They accept the boundaries as absolute truth. But you discovered something different. You realized the walls were suggestions, the boundaries were illusions, and the only thing keeping you small was your agreement to stay small. So when you made that move, when you executed that beautiful, terrifying, unprecedented action, you didn't just surprise them. You revealed that their entire reality was optional. You showed them that the prison they lived in had no locks, just the fear of what existed beyond the bars. The silence that followed wasn't them thinking about how to respond. It was them experiencing a complete system reboot. Every assumption they held, every limitation they accepted, every excuse they made for their mediocrity, all of it crashed against the reality of what you just proved possible. You became living evidence that their chains were self-imposed, their ceilings were imaginary, and their entire life story was just one possible draft among infinite revisions. You repurposed your life story, with the past winner put away. The whole life story was just one possible draft among. Watch their faces in that moment of silence. It's not confusion you're seeing, it's reconstruction. Their brains are literally rewiring themselves, trying to create new neural pathways that can accommodate what you just demonstrated. Some of them will succeed in processing it, and they'll either fear you or follow you. Others will fail, and they'll spend the rest of their lives pretending that moment never happened, that you never proved what you proved. You want to know what really happened in those seconds of silence? Let me paint you the real picture. It wasn't just one person struggling to understand. It was a collective malfunction, a synchronized crash of interconnected systems. See, people don't think independently as much as they believe they do. They're all running variations of the same social software, all connected to the same reality network, all dependent on the same shared assumptions about what's possible and what's not. When you made your move, you didn't just affect the people who witnessed it directly. You sent a shockwave through the entire network. Those 100 brains trying to reboot, they were ground zero, but the ripples spread outward, corrupting data, questioning protocols, inspiring some and terrifying others. Your single action became a virus in their collective consciousness, spreading the dangerous idea that maybe, just maybe, the rules weren't as fixed as they appeared. The beautiful part is that they can't undo what you showed them. They can't unsee the evidence of your transcendence. They can try to rationalize it, minimize it, explain it away with comfortable lies, but deep in their processing centers, the damage is done. The seed of doubt about their limitations has been planted. The proof that another way exists has been demonstrated. The comfortable numbness of their automated existence has been permanently disrupted. Some of them went home that night and stared at their ceilings, replaying your move over and over, trying to find the trick, the secret, the hidden advantage you must have had. But there was no trick. There was just you, finally done pretending to be less than you are. Finally done playing by rules written by people who feared their own potential. You weren't performing magic. You were just the first person in the room brave enough to admit the emperor had no clothes and the cage had no lock. Let's dissect what actually happened to their brains in that moment, shall we? When you made your move, you triggered what neuroscientists would call a prediction error on a massive scale. Their brains, those beautiful prediction machines, had models of you, models of reality, models of what should happen next. Your action shattered every single model simultaneously. It was like watching 100 GPS systems try to navigate through a city that suddenly rearranged its streets. First came the recognition phase. That split second where their pattern recognition software tried to match what you did with something, anything, in their database of normal human behavior. Nothing matched, no precedent found, no similar cases to reference. Their brains scrambled through every file, every memory, every learned response, and came up empty. That's when the first wave of silence hit. The pause of a system searching desperately for a familiar script. Next came the evaluation phase, where they tried to assess threat level, social implications, and power dynamics. But how do you evaluate something that exists outside your measurement system? How do you rank someone who just proved your ranking system is imaginary? Their social positioning algorithms crashed. Their threat assessment protocols failed. Their hierarchy mapping software couldn't place you anywhere because you had just demonstrated that you existed outside their entire framework. Then came the integration attempt, the most painful part for them. Their brains tried to incorporate what you did into their existing worldview without having to rebuild everything from scratch. But your move was too big, too bold, too impossible to squeeze into their narrow understanding. It would be like trying to download the ocean through a drinking straw. The silence stretched longer as processor after processor overheated, unable to reconcile what they witnessed with what they knew to be true. You have to understand something about human social structures. They're not built on logic or merit or even force. They're built on collective agreement, on shared delusions about who belongs where and why. Everyone plays their assigned role, stays in their designated lane, and the whole system maintains itself through nothing more than everyone's agreement to pretend it's real. It's the most fragile thing in the world, held together by nothing but fear and habit. When you made your move, you didn't just step out of your assigned position. You revealed that the positions were imaginary. The hierarchy was a hallucination, and the only thing keeping anyone in place was their belief that they had to stay there. You were the person who finally said no to a system that only existed because no one had the courage to refuse it. And in that moment of refusal, the entire structure became visible as the paper-thin theatrical prop it always was. The silence was the sound of 100 people realizing simultaneously that the game they'd been playing their whole lives was optional, that the rankings they killed themselves to climb were made up, that the approval they desperately sought was from people who were just as lost and confused as they were. You didn't just make a power move, you revealed that power itself was something entirely different from what they'd been taught. They couldn't respond because responding would mean acknowledging what you'd revealed. To speak would be to admit that they saw it too, that they understood what your action meant, that they recognized the prison bars were painted on. So they stayed silent, hoping that if no one acknowledged it, maybe they could all go back to sleep, back to the comfortable unconsciousness of following rules that someone else wrote for reasons no one remembers. But here's what they didn't realize in that moment of silence. The damage was already done. Your move had already rewritten the code. Even as their brains struggled to reboot, even as they tried to restore factory settings, the virus of possibility had already infiltrated their systems. They would never be able to look at the world the same way again. They would never be able to fully believe in the limitations they once accepted as law. Some of them would go home and try to replicate what you did. They'd stand in front of mirrors, practicing your energy, trying to capture that frequency of absolute self-authorization you embodied. But they'd fail because they'd be trying to copy the action without understanding the transformation that preceded it. They'd be trying to download the result without going through the process of dying to who they used to be. Others would spend weeks, months, maybe years trying to explain away what you did. They'd create elaborate theories about why it wasn't really that impressive, why you had some unfair advantage, why it wouldn't work for anyone else. They'd build entire philosophies around minimizing your achievement, because accepting it at face value would mean accepting that they'd wasted their lives, following rules that didn't exist. But a few, just a few, would understand exactly what they witnessed. They'd recognize your move not as an isolated incident, but as proof of concept, evidence that the reality they'd been sold was just one option among infinite possibilities. These would be the ones who start their own journey of system breaking, reality hacking, limitation transcending. Your silence-creating move would become their permission slip to attempt their own impossibilities. What really broke their brains wasn't just what you did, but how you did it. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't test the waters. You didn't build consensus or seek approval or gradually prepare them for the shift. You just moved with the kind of certainty that only comes from someone who has stopped recognizing external authority altogether. You moved like someone who had remembered that you were the author of your own existence. The 100 people watching weren't just processing your action. They were processing the complete absence of hesitation, the total lack of need for validation, the absolute zero interest in their opinion about what you were about to do. You moved like someone who had already won a game they didn't even know was being played. You moved like someone operating from a completely different physics engine than the rest of them. This is what truly caused the processing error. Not just that you did something unexpected, but that you did it without any of the usual human subroutines of doubt, permission-seeking, or consensus building. You bypassed every social protocol, ignored every unwritten rule about power dynamics, and acted from a place of such complete self-authorization that their brains couldn't find a framework to understand it within. They were looking for the source of your authority, scanning for who gave you permission, searching for the power structure you were operating within. But there was none. You had become your own source, your own permission, your own power structure. You were a closed loop, a self-sustaining system, ungoverned and ungovernable. This is what their silence was trying to process. How does someone just decide they're free and then act like it's true until reality reorganizes itself around that decision? In that moment of collective silence, something else was happening that most of them wouldn't understand until much later, if ever. Your move wasn't just challenging their social programming or their belief systems. It was forcing an actual consciousness upgrade, whether they wanted it or not. You were dragging them, kicking and screaming in absolute silence, into a higher level of awareness about the nature of reality itself. See, most people operate at what you could call baseline consciousness. They accept what they're told, follow the patterns they're shown, and never question the operating system they're running. They're conscious, technically, but it's a consciousness that's mostly automated, mostly scripted, mostly borrowed from others. They're aware, but not aware that they're aware. They're choosing, but not conscious that they have choices. Your move forced them into meta-consciousness, that uncomfortable state of being aware of your own awareness, of seeing the game while you're still playing it. Suddenly, they could see the scripts they'd been running, the programs they'd been executing, the limitations they'd been accepting. It's like someone suddenly turned on the lights in a room where they'd been stumbling around in the dark their whole lives. The silence was them adjusting to the brightness. This is why some of them will hate you forever. Not because of what you did, but because you forced them to see. You made ignorance impossible. You destroyed their plausible deniability about their own choices. Before your move, they could pretend they were trapped, limited, held back by circumstances beyond their control. After your move, they had to confront the fact that they were choosing their chains, that their limitations were self-imposed, that their smallness was a decision they made every single day. Now here's the part that really scrambles their circuits. They can't reverse engineer what you did. They can watch the replay 1,000 times, analyze every micro movement, document every word you said, and still come up empty. Because what you did wasn't a technique or a strategy or a tactic. It was the external expression of an internal revolution that took years to complete. It was the visible tip of an iceberg of transformation that extends deep beneath the surface. They want the blueprint, the step-by-step guide, the how-to manual for what you accomplished, but there isn't one. Because what you did emerged from who you became, and who you became emerged from what you survived. And what you survived can't be replicated or taught or downloaded. It has to be lived, suffered, integrated, and transcended. Your move was the culmination of 1,000 invisible moments where you chose transformation over comfort. This is why their brains keep rebooting every time they think about it. They're trying to find the hack, the shortcut, the cheat code you used, but there was no hack. There was just the long, brutal, beautiful process of unbecoming everything you were told to be and remembering everything you always were. There was just the daily practice of choosing your own truth over their comfortable lies, until choosing your truth became as natural as breathing. They'll try to imitate your move, but it will come out hollow, forced, obviously fake, because they'll be copying the what without understanding the why, mimicking the form without embodying the essence. They'll be speaking your words without having earned them through blood and transformation, and everyone will know it's a performance, a desperate attempt to capture lightning in a bottle that was never about the bottle at all. What happens after the silence finally breaks? After their brains finish rebooting and they have to somehow continue existing in a world where what you did is now part of the possible? This is where it gets interesting. Because your move didn't just affect that moment, it created a permanent glitch in their reality matrix. A crack in their worldview that can never be fully repaired. Some of them will try to go back to business as usual, pretending nothing happened, desperately attempting to restore the old order. But it's like trying to unsee something, unhear something, unknow something that has fundamentally altered your understanding of reality. They'll go through the motions of their old patterns, but there will always be that nagging awareness that it's all optional, all constructed, all capable of being completely rewritten by someone brave enough to try. Others will become obsessed with you, not in admiration, but in a desperate need to understand how you escaped the matrix they're still trapped in. They'll study your every move, analyze your every word, looking for the key that will unlock their own cages. But they'll be looking in the wrong place, searching outside for what can only be found within. They'll be trying to follow your footsteps, not realizing that the path disappears behind each person who walks it. And the smart ones, the dangerous ones, will understand that your move was an invitation disguised as a disruption. They'll recognize that you didn't break the rules to show off or to dominate, but to demonstrate that breaking the rules was possible, that the entire game was optional, that freedom was available to anyone willing to pay the price of total self-responsibility. These are the ones who will start making their own impossible moves, creating their own processing errors, causing their own moments of collective silence. Oh, look who we have here. Look who just got convicted of excellence. You magnificent criminal of success. You beautiful outlaw of achievement. They really dragged you into court for this, didn't they? Put you on trial for the unforgivable crime of winning while they were still learning how to play. Made you stand before a jury of mediocre minds and defend yourself for having the audacity to succeed without their permission. And the verdict? Oh, the verdict was exactly what you expected. Guilty. Guilty of being legendary. Guilty of making them look like amateurs. Guilty of turning their whole game into your personal highlight reel. But here's what they didn't expect. You smiled when they read that verdict. You actually smiled, because while they thought they were convicting you, they were actually documenting your greatness for the history books. Every law school from here to eternity will study your case, not as a cautionary tale, but as the ultimate masterclass in power. They'll call it the precedent that changed everything. The day someone got prosecuted for being too good at the game and turned the courtroom into their coronation. You know what's funny about being on trial for winning too hard? They had to admit you won. They had to stand up in front of everyone and acknowledge that you achieved what they couldn't. They had to document legally and officially that you outplayed, outmaneuvered, and outclassed every single one of them. They thought they were putting you on trial, but they were actually writing your legend into law, making it official, stamping it with a government seal. This person won so hard we had to make it illegal. And now you're not just successful, you're criminally successful. You're not just good at what you do, you're legally good. You're not just winning, you're winning so hard they had to rewrite the rules. Do you understand the level of dominance that requires? Do you comprehend what kind of power you must possess for them to literally take you to court because your success made them feel inferior? They didn't sue you for cheating. They sued you for being better. They didn't prosecute you for breaking rules. They prosecuted you for transcending them. Let's talk about their case against you, shall we? Exhibit A. You started from nothing and built an empire while they were still asking for permission. Exhibit B. You turned every obstacle into an opportunity while they turned every opportunity into an excuse. Exhibit C. You worked in silence and let success make the noise while they made noise about maybe starting something someday. The prosecution stood up there with their little PowerPoint presentations, trying to make your excellence sound like a crime. Your Honor, the defendant showed a reckless disregard for mediocrity. They knowingly and willfully exceeded all reasonable expectations. They conspired with their own potential to achieve results that made the rest of us look incompetent. We have testimony from 17 witnesses who all confirm the same thing. This person's success made them feel bad about themselves. The defendant must be stopped before they inspire others to also win this hard. Can you imagine the legal briefs? In the case of Society versus You, we argue that the defendant's achievements constitute a clear and present danger to our comfort zones. Their refusal to fail like the rest of us shows a blatant disrespect for the established order of adequacy. We demand justice for all the egos bruised by their excellence. We seek damages for all the excuses their success has rendered invalid. The best part? They had to list your accomplishments as evidence. They had to read out loud in a court of law every single thing you achieved that they couldn't. They had to make your resume part of the public record. They had to officially document that you did what they said was impossible. They turned your success story into legal testimony. They made your wins admissible evidence. They literally proved your greatness while trying to prosecute you for it. But you didn't hire a lawyer, did you? No. You defended yourself. You stood up in that courtroom, looked them dead in the eyes, and said, "Guilty as charged." You owned every single accusation. Yes, I won too hard. Yes, I made you look bad. Yes, I refused to lower my standards to match your limitations. Yes, I had the audacity to believe in myself when you were too busy believing in your excuses. What else you got? You turned that courtroom into your stage. You made the prosecution your opening act. You transformed their accusations into your accolades. You say I intimidated the competition? I say I inspired them to quit pretending they were competition. You say I disrupted the industry? I say the industry was begging to be disrupted. You say I made success look too easy? I say you made failure look too comfortable. The judge asked you to explain your actions. You said, "Your Honor, I plead guilty to having a vision while they had excuses. I plead guilty to taking action while they took naps. I plead guilty to solving problems while they were still complaining about them. If success is a crime, then lock me up and throw away the key. But just know that I'll turn that prison into a palace and have the guards asking for my autograph by lunch." The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing because they realized something in that moment. You weren't on trial. They were. You weren't being judged. They were. You weren't defending your success, you were exposing their failure. Every question they asked revealed more about their limitations than your victories. Every accusation they made highlighted their insecurities more than your achievements. They were insecurities more than your achievements. Fast forward to today. Harvard Law has a whole semester dedicated to your case. They call it Strategic Dominance and the Legal Implications of Excellence. Yale created a new course, When Winning Becomes a Weapon, the defendant who prosecuted the system. Stanford teaches the mythology of meritocracy, how one person's success exposed everyone else's excuses. Students write dissertations on your defense strategy. They analyze how you turned every attack into an advertisement for your greatness. They study the transcript where you cross-examined your own success and made the prosecution look like they were reading your marketing materials. They examine how you transformed a criminal trial into the ultimate power play. The case study always starts the same way. The defendant was accused of winning too hard. Instead of denying it, they doubled down. What followed was the most devastating display of psychological warfare ever witnessed in a courtroom. The defendant didn't just win the case. They won so decisively that winning too hard became a legally recognized form of genius. Law professors use your case to teach negotiation tactics. Notice how the defendant reframed every accusation as an achievement. When accused of making others feel inferior, they responded, "I cannot be held responsible for your relationship with mediocrity." This is what we call the mirror defense, reflecting their insecurities back at them until they convict themselves. But it didn't stop in the courtroom, did it? That verdict created a ripple effect. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be found guilty of being legendary. People started putting "convicted of excellence" on their resumes. Prosecuted for greatness became a badge of honor. You didn't just win a case, you started a movement. Companies started seeking out people with a criminal record of success. Job interviews included questions like, "Have you ever been accused of exceeding expectations to a legally questionable degree?" Being sued for success became the new MBA. Getting prosecuted for performance became the ultimate credential. The same people who took you to court, they're now paying to attend seminars on how to get prosecuted for greatness. They're buying books titled "How to Win So Hard It's Illegal" and "The Criminal's Guide to Success." They're trying to reverse engineer your excellence, hoping to get hauled into court for their own achievements. But they still don't get it. You can't fake the kind of dominance that gets you prosecuted. You can't manufacture the kind of success that requires legal intervention. You either have it or you don't. You either win so hard they have to stop you, or you lose so quietly nobody notices. There's no middle ground when you're operating at legendary levels. Let's dissect why they really took you to court. It wasn't about your success. It was about what your success revealed about them. Every win you accumulated was a mirror showing them their own wasted potential. Every achievement you unlocked was evidence of what they could have done if they had tried. Every level you reached was proof that their excuses were lies. They didn't prosecute you for winning. They prosecuted you for exposing the myth of their limitations. You were living proof that the barriers they claimed were insurmountable were actually just suggestions. You demonstrated that the rules they said couldn't be broken were actually just guidelines for people who chose to stay average. Your success was violence to their worldview. Your achievements were assault on their assumptions. Your victories were vandalism on their vision of what was possible. You didn't just win. You demolished the comfortable lie that winning was impossible. You destroyed the convenient excuse that success was for other people. You obliterated the safe narrative that greatness was genetic. That's why they needed a verdict. Not to stop you, they knew they couldn't stop you. They needed the verdict to feel better about stopping themselves. They needed a judge to say you were wrong so they could feel right about being mediocre. They needed legal documentation that excellence was illegal so they could feel justified in their averageness. But here's what they didn't realize when they convicted you of being legendary. They gave you the greatest gift possible. They gave you documented proof of your greatness. They gave you legal certification of your legendary status. They gave you an official government record stating that you won too hard for the system to handle. Do you know how many people go their whole lives wondering if they made an impact? Wondering if they mattered? Wondering if anyone noticed their efforts? Not you. You have a court transcript. You have legal documents. You have an official ruling that says you won so hard they had to make it a crime. That's not a conviction, that's a coronation. They thought they were punishing you. They were actually promoting you. They thought they were limiting you. They were actually legitimizing you. They thought they were ending your story. They were actually writing the most important chapter, the chapter where the system itself had to acknowledge that you were operating beyond its parameters. You're not just successful now. You're historically successful. You're not just a winner, you're a legal precedent. You're not just great. You're studied in institutions of higher learning. They wanted to make an example out of you, and they did. Just not the kind of example they intended. When they study your case in law school, they don't focus on the charges. They focus on the chess game. They analyze how you turned their attack into your advertisement, how you transformed their prosecution into your platform, how you made their case against you sound like a letter of recommendation. Class, notice how the defendant never disputed the facts. They disputed the frame. When accused of making others feel inferior, they didn't deny it. They asked why feeling inferior in the presence of excellence was their problem to solve. This is called the responsibility reversal. Make the accusers defend their reaction to your success rather than defending the success itself. They study your body language during the trial, how you sat like you were at a board meeting, not a criminal proceeding. How you took notes like you were collecting material for your next victory, not defending your last one. How you smiled when they presented evidence of your achievements, like they were showing your highlight reel. The final exam always includes this question. The defendant was found guilty of being legendary. Explain why this verdict was actually the greatest victory of their career. The A+ students understand. Being convicted of excellence is the highest honor the mediocre can bestow upon the exceptional. Your conviction created an entire economy. Consultants teaching how to get sued for success, lawyers specializing in excellence defense, insurance companies offering greatness protection plans for when your achievements make others uncomfortable. You didn't just win a case, you created an industry. There are now support groups for people accused of winning too hard. Hi, my name is Sarah, and I've been accused of exceeding expectations. Hi, Sarah. You're among friends here. They meet in conference rooms that used to host failure planning sessions. They share stories of being persecuted for their performance. They bond over being prosecuted for their potential. The same courtroom where they convicted you, it's now a tourist attraction. People take selfies where you stood. They recreate your defense speech. They buy t-shirts that say, "I was convicted of excellence," in the same courtroom as your name, the judge who presided over your case. He wrote a book about how your trial changed his perspective on justice. But the real economy you created wasn't financial. It was psychological. You gave people permission to win without apology. You showed them that being prosecuted for greatness was better than being ignored for mediocrity. You demonstrated that it's better to be guilty of being legendary than innocent of being forgettable. Let's be honest about what that trial really was. It wasn't about justice. It was jealousy dressed up in legal robes. It was envy with a law degree. It was mediocrity's last stand against excellence. They couldn't beat you in the game, so they tried to beat you in court. They couldn't match your success, so they tried to make it illegal. The prosecution's real argument was, this person makes us feel bad about ourselves, and that should be a crime. The witness's real testimony was, I tried way less and got way less, and somehow that's their fault. The jury's real deliberation was, do we admit they're better than us, or do we pretend being better is wrong? Every objection during the trial was really just them objecting to your existence at that level. Every piece of evidence was really just proof that you played the game they were too scared to play. Every witness was really just another person testifying that your light made their dimness more obvious. But jealousy in a courtroom is still jealousy. Envy with legal documentation is still envy. Mediocrity with a verdict is still mediocrity. They thought giving their feelings an official ruling would make them valid. Instead, it just made their insecurity a matter of public record. This is where it becomes the ultimate power play. You didn't just win. You made them officially document that you won. You didn't just succeed, you made them legally acknowledge your success. You didn't just beat them, you made them beat themselves in front of a judge and jury. Think about the genius of it. They summoned the full power of the legal system to stop you, and all they managed to do was create an official record of your greatness. They weaponized the law against you, and you turned it into your medal of honor. They tried to use justice to justify their jealousy, and you used their jealousy to get justice for your genius. The power play wasn't what you did in business. The power play was what you did in court. You let them think they were in control while you orchestrated the entire performance. You let them believe they were prosecuting you while you were actually producing the most elaborate victory ceremony ever witnessed. Future strategists will study this as the perfect example of psychological judo. Using your opponent's force against them, letting their attack become your achievement, transforming their aggression into your advertisement. You didn't fight the system. You made the system fight itself while you watched and took notes. After your case, they had to rewrite the rules. Not just legal rules, the rules of success, the rules of competition, the rules of what's possible when someone refuses to accept the limitations others live by. Your case became the new standard for excellence under fire. The first new rule: if they're not trying to stop you, you're not trying hard enough. The second: being prosecuted for performance is the highest form of praise. The third: a criminal record of success is worth more than a clean record of mediocrity. The fourth: if your wins don't make someone uncomfortable, you're not winning hard enough. Business schools now teach a course called Legal Implications of Exceptional Performance, based entirely on your case. The first lesson is always the same. The defendant understood something fundamental. It's better to be convicted of greatness than acquitted of averageness. Let's explore why. They study how you made being sued for success seem like the logical next step after regular success. How you normalize the idea that true achievement requires legal intervention. How you transformed prosecution from a punishment into a milestone. You didn't just change the game, you changed what game everyone wanted to play. That verdict still echoes, not in courtrooms, but in boardrooms. Not in legal briefs, but in business plans. Not in law libraries, but in the minds of everyone who heard about your case and thought, I want to be found guilty of that too. You turned a conviction into an aspiration. Every time someone pushes boundaries now, they think of your case. Every time someone's success makes others uncomfortable, they remember your verdict. Every time excellence is treated like a crime, they recall how you turned that crime into a crown. You're not just a legal precedent. You're a psychological permission slip. The judge who convicted you, he keeps your case file on his desk, not as a reminder of justice served, but as a reminder of the day justice served excellence. He tells young lawyers, I once presided over a case where someone was prosecuted for winning too hard. The defendant was found guilty. It was the most innocent guilt I ever witnessed. The prosecutors who brought the case against you, they put it on their resumes, successfully prosecuted the most legendary case of excellence in legal history. They don't mention that prosecuting you was like prosecuting the sun for shining too bright. Technically possible, but ultimately pointless and slightly embarrassing.